I'm Traci Austin, your host of the People Strategy Podcast. This show provides interviews with organizational leaders and ongoing coaching experiences that highlight elevating people in organizations through a people strategy roadmap. Welcome to this episode of the People Strategy Podcast. We have an amazing special guest today, which is a listener of the show that has implemented some incredible actions into his organization to get some phenomenal results of growing his team, obtaining a promotion, and working less because all of his management positions are filled. So I am so excited to introduce you to Adam Gruszcynski. Adam is the IT Director at Potawatomi Casino Hotel. And Adam also first started listening to podcasts to roast a friend. So join us in this incredibly engaging conversation where we really see how taking an insight, creating an action around it can get you some big results that you didn't even know were possible. Cannot wait for you to listen along with us. Adam, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me, Traci.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely love the story of how you and I got connected. And, this is a first for us as bringing a listener into the podcast to really share the impacts that, they've had from listening to the show and, putting some of those insights into action. But I'm curious, how did you end up finding our show to begin with?
Yeah, so it's kind of a funny story. It was around October of 2022. I just started becoming somewhat active on LinkedIn, and I saw one of my friends from high school was on a podcast in the similar vein of you, Let's Talk HR. And I was like, oh, I'm going to have to give this a listen, not because I was expecting, to get any sort of wisdom or advice from it, but because my high school buddy was on a podcast and I wanted to listen to have some, some stuff in my back pocket to roast him next time we went out to the bar and had a few drinks. Be like, man, I can't believe you did this or said that or, whatever. And it actually turned out to be the opposite, where when he was talking on the podcast, it was almost as if he was talking directly to me because he's an executive recruiter and he was talking about the hiring difficulties that a lot in hiring positions are experiencing right now. And instead of trying to find information to, give him a hard time, he actually, taught me some things and exposed me to some different situations where after that podcast was over, I was like, man, that was really, really helpful. There's got to be other podcasts out there. So then I just went into Google and your podcast was one of the first ones that, popped up and I started listening to you. And since then, I've been a regular weekly listener to your show.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that, Adam. Isn't it amazing how sometimes our intentions of I'm just going to go roast a friend turn out to be like, oh man, there was something that I needed to learn in that.
Yeah, I was not expecting it to be, work beneficial at all. If anything, I was like, oh, I'll put it on as background noise and I'll do some other stuff. And I really didn't do anything else. I listened to it intently and took notes because there was a lot of good stuff in there that I used or tried to incorporate into my day-to-day here at work.
Yeah, absolutely. And that openness for you as a leader is, wow, I was open to receiving whatever showed up. So I'm curious, I know that when you reached out, you're like, I have done some really cool things with what, I've heard on the podcast. And I know I reached out, I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And you're like, I didn't think you'd ever say yes.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, I was working one then like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if she actually had a guest who listened and tried to take things that were talked about either directly by you or guests you've had on the show and either incorporate it or work it into their day-to-day and found some sort of success with it. And you thought it was a good idea, and here we are today.
Absolutely. So I am curious, what are those concepts that you've utilized from our show in your role?
There's really two concepts that I feel have worked well here that I've taken from different episodes you've done. And the biggest one is the pre-boarding onboarding section that you covered. And there was a stretch of about 2 months where in every episode you were talking about some variation or different aspect or approach to the pre-boarding onboarding of any employee at any organization. And a lot of that I felt would benefit the department here at Potawatomi Casino and Hotel. as an employee, when you get hired, there is an onboarding program that is ran by our human resources department. That's 2 days of you getting everything you need to know about what you need to do here and how the organization runs, and a history of the Forest County Potawatomi community tribe that we all report to. But then when you're released from the HR orientation and you go to your respective departments, when you came to IT, there really wasn't anything established. It was like, all right, here's your computer, get to work. And listening to you, I felt that there was some value and some benefit that could be had to increase the relationship with new employees coming on board and having them be set up to be successful employees in the IT department here. And one of the things you talked about is even before they set foot in orientation or their first day here, you should be proactive and reach out to them to establish that line of communication and start working on building that trust between you and the new hire. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It can be very simple. And we've taken what you've talked about and really written a letter that is essentially a template where you can then just insert, the person's name, the job, but it's all the same information. We're very excited to have you join our team. Here are some basic things you should be aware of that are specific to our department. How we have, in our organization, we're a unique department. We actually have a kitchen. So, it has a microwave, it has a fridge, coffee, all of that. Like if you want K-cups, we have K-cups, but please bring in your own flavor if you have something specific. What the dress code is here. Who will meet you once you are released from human resources orientation and how to get to where we are. And just basic information that is just good to have for anyone starting out. And to me, I don't want to say it was common sense because I didn't have it, but I was like, well, this is a no-brainer. We should be doing this. So when I had this idea, I formed I don't want to say a coalition, but a group of people, some who have been here for a while and some who were rather new. And I said, what can we do to make the onboarding process better? And I noted ideas from your show, and I used that to guide the conversation with the individuals of this group to get to what we have now. So besides like the pre-boarding, letter, and just a note on that, I've left it up to my managers of the department how they want to handle it, whether it be in an email or old printed letter. I prefer the printed letter on official company letterhead in the official envelope. That's my preference. But I leave it up to each hiring manager if they want to do it electronically or via postal mail. But the other thing we ask before being brought on is just some very basic things about you. What's your favorite snack? What is your favorite drink? And then we try to as long as it's not some insane request. If you like Snicker bars and Coke, you'll have a few Snicker bars and a bottle or two of Coke for you at your desk waiting for you. It doesn't provide any real benefit to the organization, but it helps, strengthen that bond between the new employee and the department to help get that on the right foot and build to a very positive working relationship.
What I love about this is seeing how it's being implemented. And I'm curious, because you just said something about, the Snickers bar and the Coke on the desk, not necessarily providing a real benefit to the organization. And I want to challenge that a little bit, Adam, to say, did that increase the trust and the connection between that new employee and their team?
I think it helped more with the connection of the new employee and the team. Definitely 100%. It showed like, oh, you asked me a question, you wanted to know the answer, and you took the time to provide me with one of those things I really enjoy. So that helps set the baseline for that. If you tell me something, I will try to use it in some way, shape, or form to help make our relationship better, which just makes for a more trustful environment.
Amazing. I love it. I love it. I love it. So what has been the impact of that since you've implemented this process?
I don't want to say it's a new process, but it's rather new. And not all of my hiring managers hire as many employees. There's just some positions are maybe higher turnover than others. But the manager of my help desk has really started using it because there tends to be more turnover there. And it seemed to help set the right foot out the gate. And any advantage we can have to help keep our employees happy and build that trust and establish a foundation where they're excited to be here and want to be here, pays dividends.
And that's setting the culture ahead of time, right? Like what you're doing when they walk in, you're inviting them into the culture and the expectation as they're in their role. Oh my gosh, I love it. I cannot wait to hear your second thing.
Yeah, the second thing I heard of before and I knew what it was, but the way you presented it was a new way of me thinking of it. And it was the three letters, EVP, employee value proposition. And when you talked about it, I didn't connect the dots at first. I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then, I don't know, after I listened to your podcast, and I don't know if I was driving in my car or doing something else, like the light bulb came on. It was like, EVP, I've known this my entire life. Everyone has known this. It's what are the added perks you get besides having a job for working where you work? And once I made that connection and that light bulb went off, I was like, I can use this. Because one of the main reasons why I originally started becoming active on LinkedIn was because we were having a lot of open positions within our department. And selfishly, without those positions being hired, meant more work for myself and the existing staff. And if we got those positions hired, obviously the work would be, spread evenly or more appropriately where it needs to be. So how do I get qualified people in these positions? And that's where that EVP really came in. Potawatomi Casino Hotel, is one of the largest employers in Milwaukee and southeastern Wisconsin. And there are a lot of great benefits that I don't know that a lot of people who don't work here know about. Like we have an on-site clinic. You can go to get medical advice or checkups or lab works, before your shift, on your break, at lunch, after work. You don't have to schedule a separate appointment or, start late. You can just do it and it's much easier. It's much quicker. And the best, it's free of cost. There is no associated fee to go into the on-site clinic. That is a huge perk. Not a lot of people know about that. The organization also offers Lyft rides to employees should you need them. If it's a really bad storm and you don't feel comfortable driving, we want you to come to work. We'll cover the cost of Lyft. Or you drive here and your car breaks down and you can't get home, we'll give you the lift that you need to get home. That is a great perk. So I, took your EVP mentality and incorporated that into LinkedIn postings, because if you go to LinkedIn, everybody's hiring. Hey, we have this position at fill in this company. It's a great opportunity. Come work for me. Well, how do I stand out? If I start selling some of the perks that we have, chances are that will get my job postings better traction, because wow, you have on-site clinic, you have lifts, 401k, insurance, all these perks that people don't know about. If people know, like, wow, this place is a great place to work. Maybe I'm interested in IT. Let's see what they have IT openings for. And it just was a trickle-down water effect that by me starting to do what I called the reason campaign, every week I would post a different reason why it's a great place to work at Potawatomi Casino Hotel, helped really gain a lot of traction and helped me fill those positions with really qualified people that have been beneficial to the department and have been great hires. And I don't know that I would have gotten that had it not been for the EVP episode where you talked about that.
Amazing. And you started the conversation with, I did this for selfish reasons. And yet it had a significant impact on your team and on the organization. So at that time, you had 3 manager positions open and you were working 65 plus hours a week?
Yep. Trying to manage, do my day-to-day, but also keep the 3 teams that didn't have a manager on track and focused to do what, the day-to-day or the projects or the business needs was a lot. Not sustainable. No one can do that. So getting qualified, people from a technology standpoint and a culture standpoint was crucial to the success of the department. And I really believe incorporating EVP into job postings led to that. So
amazing. And the outcome of that is you're working 40-ish hours a week and you've got all 6 of your managers now?
I have all my teams have managers. They're all doing really well in their position. I would like to say I'm, working 40 hours a week.
Yeah, I said ish.
Yeah, we'll say ish. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. And I love this because you're showing this connection between, all right, we took this idea. I love that you named it the reason campaign, right? Here's all the reasons. And this is that, we can put something out there and the way you interpret it, pick it up and put it back out into the world, creates it as your own to get those results. Thank you so much for sharing that.
And it was interesting to see the positive effect that I did not anticipate, incorporating EVP into my reasoning campaign on LinkedIn. It became very popular here at work. I got a lot of comments from people passing in the hall like, hey, that was really cool that you talked about this specific perk, or like, I'm surprised nobody's talked about that before. Really great to hear the positive feedback. But then from, just networking in the IT area, a lot of other people who don't work here, but I see at conferences or trade shows or seminars or just, out and about or deal with on a semi-regular basis, they're like, wow, you really kind of made yourself stand out from the rest of the people just saying, hey, we have an open job. That was really cool. And those conversations had actually led me to, be asked to talk about how I started and got that, at conferences, which was not something I ever anticipated.
Amazing.
Yes.
It's like those rewards that were like, I didn't even know that was out there. I was just trying to not work the additional 12 hours a week.
How much I have to work, but it has all these, unintended benefits.
Right. I mean, and it all started with wanting to roast a friend in a bar. I mean,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. So I'm curious. We shifted our podcast platform, I don't know, 9 months ago or so.
Yep.
And I know since then you have some favorite one-liners that have come up. What are those?
Yeah. So with your shifts in the podcast format, it's like every other episode you bring on a guest and they talk about what they're doing and how they're working with you or have taken your strategies and implement it. And, a lot of times when I listen to your podcast, I'm doing other things at home, whether I'm, ironing clothes or whatever. So I'm doing something and then I'm like, oh, that's really good. I have to grab my phone and, email me that one liner because I'm going to try to use that or incorporate that concept here at work. And one of the early phrases that you said, and you kind of go back to, is about culture. And, how culture is a direct result of the behaviors we are allowing, whether good or bad, when you're not there. Like, what are people doing? What have you instilled upon people that they're going to do what your vision and your ask is when you're not in the room? And you've come back to that, multiple times with multiple interviews that, that is just a fundamental thing that if you don't establish that good culture, you're not going to be successful. So that is one of the biggest ones I've stolen and have tried to, work and implement here. But as you know, things don't change overnight. Culture doesn't change overnight. So it just takes time.
And what are some of those small wins or signposts that you're seeing so far, even though you're not at the end of the road yet?
It's just small things. One of the big things I've been focusing here in the IT department is how our help desk is viewed by the entire organization and the service we provide. And it's small things that we've started to do is we kind of have set upon when you answer the phone, here's kind of a script of what you need to say and always end, like with thank you or, please let me know if there's anything else I can do. It's having a predefined message and just saying thank you at the very end. Not a big ask, but, it's an inch. And if you pile that with another inch and on top of an inch, you get to that mile pretty quickly. And it following up, if we think we resolved the problem, great. Check back with the user, either in 24 hours or in a week and be like, hey, we worked on this problem. I know it was, causing you headaches. I think we fixed it. Are we good? Simply following up and making sure that, the things we're supposed to be taken care of are being taken care of. So it's small things like that has gone on to try to change the culture because we all have guests and we all are providing a service. Let's make sure the service we provide is top notch.
Amazing. What other one-liners have you picked up on?
One of the one-liners that you've said and that I've used when talking to people more so outside of my organization comes back from that EVP episode where you kind of essentially said recruiting is marketing. Whether you know it or not, you're marketing yourself, your organization, and the job you're trying to fill to the person who is most qualified for it. So how do you get the most eyes and the most ears on that thing you want people to see? And it's all about recruiting. And I hammer that point home a lot to others when talking about how we've had some success in hiring and hiring really good candidates and strong candidates. So recruiting is marketing. is a big one. Another one you talked about and you go back to regularly is just winning. What does winning look like? And at first I'm like, what? That makes no sense. The more I thought about it and you keep referencing it, it makes total sense. Winning is, what is the end goal? What are you trying to accomplish? You have to know what you're trying to do, or else you're never going to win. And to be successful at winning, there are two things need to happen. A, you have to clearly define what the win looks like. We just opened up our permanent sports book here. It is, massive. I would argue one of the best sports books in the country. Our goal was, on this date, we are going to open the sports book. So we knew by May 3rd, we had to have all this done. That was a very clear goal to meet. The other part of being successful at winning is to meet regularly to make sure you are moving towards that goal that you define. And we had regular meetings, both within the department in IT and then other departments, because it was not just an IT effort. It was a sports book effort. It was a facilities effort. There was multiple departments involved to make sure we're all aligned to make sure we can win and accomplish this goal. Another one-liner that I appreciated, and it didn't necessarily, it wasn't from you, Traci, but it was from one of your guests, and I don't remember who, but I remember bolding it and underlining it, is it's better to speak up and be wrong than to be quiet and sorry, which I love, because in any business, there are all different types of personalities, and you're going to get people who are loud and willing to speak up and share their opinion, and you have to not work to get it. They just freely give it. And then there are those that are maybe more quiet or timid, who you really have to work on to get them to participate in a conversation, or they have the right answer. They're just either not comfortable or confident in giving it. And I want everyone to be able to speak up and say what they have to say. I don't care if you're wrong. I'd rather have you be wrong or maybe not quite right, and then with something you said, we can tweak it and get it right, than not to say anything and then we have a big problem later down the road, or we didn't think of something, or you thought of it and didn't say it, and now we have to go back and do it. So getting everyone to talk and share their ideas, that line just hit home to me.
Thank you so much for those one-liners and how you've implemented them. And can I just say, Adam, you have been brilliant at marketing throughout. You talked about the sports book. You talked about your benefits. You've talked about Potawatomi. It is amazing how you've incorporated that marketing into everything you're saying. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's phenomenal.
Thank you.
And I know that there's been a couple book recommendations. I know when we were talking, you're like, Traci, I've purchased all these books after this podcast, and this is what I've done with them. Do you have one or two of those that you want to share?
I think the most impactful book recommendation I got was Unreasonable Hospitality. That book, while focuses on a restaurant, and we have restaurants here, but I'm not in the restaurant business, but I work very closely with our food and beverage operation here. It's not so much about how to run a restaurant, but how to run the team and change the culture of the restaurant so that the restaurant can be successful. And those concepts of employee motivation and leadership thought I've taken here, and I've started working with managers here on my team of working and trying to incorporate some of those messages from Unreasonable Hospitality. One of the ones I really, gravitated to was 11 Madison Park was the name of the restaurant. And it was a very nice restaurant. It was an upscale restaurant, but the people in charge of the restaurant knew they had to do things to be better and ultimately achieve their goal of being a 4-star restaurant. And they knew areas of weakness were in their beverage game. So their coffee, alcohol, and wine. So the manager had the idea of, well, why don't we see if anyone on our staff is really, really, really passionate about one of these areas, and then work with them and help them grow into being the person in charge of that. Because if you find somebody who's really passionate about a thing and you say, all right, now you're in charge of this thing that you're very passionate about for in your organization, chances are they're going to be highly motivated to make it succeed. And in the book, they did that. They found a coffee guy, a wine guy, and a beer guy. And they were all passionate about those 3 areas. and they were able to turn it around and make those some of the strongest areas in the restaurant. So I really gravitated to that aspect of the book.
I love that. And I want to just share this back, and I don't know if you've implemented anything yet on how to figure out where folks' passions are at work. Do you want me to give you a question? So I've got two. And the first one is, what is a work bucket list item? And then the second is, what is a personal bucket list item? So here's why, is when we sometimes ask a direct question, we freeze and we may not know how to answer it because we don't know how it's going to be utilized, or we don't want it to be utilized that way. Let's face it, right?
Yep.
But if we look at it and say, what's a work bucket list item? And this is hilarious because I actually just had this conversation with a leadership program that I lead with this group this morning. And for me, a work bucket list item for me is to speak on a stage in Norway up to 5,000 people by 2028. That is so random, and I have no idea how it connects to anything, but that's like this random work bucket list.
Sure.
A personal bucket list is to, travel all over the world, specifically, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Europe. So you notice how those two things came together. Now, as a manager, I'm going to look at that and go, how do I make those two things happen? Because now I know what they're passionate about and what their career aspirations are. How do I connect them?
And I think I think you had a guest speaker on not too long ago who kind of did talk about taking the personal and the business and melding it together. I think his name was
Jonathan Reynolds. Yeah.
He was amazing, and a lot of what he said, resonated with me, and I think you're, leaning on that concept too with him. So the other thing from the book that I really gravitated to is, as you go up the management ladder, chances are you're not doing the day-to-day stuff regularly. You're aware of it and you might pitch in here and there, but you're not doing it regularly. So when there is areas of improvement or suggestions that can be made to improve areas, you might not be so far in the weeds that you can make those. So asking the people who are doing it day in and day out, like, hey, if you could fix one thing or make one change, either to make your day more successful or more efficient, what would that one change be? And then if you give them the time to come up with it, chances are they can really make a change in the positive, either to be more efficient or streamline a process. And that really stuck with me as something I wanted to try and incorporate here as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Adam, for sharing your insights. And I'm just so grateful that you reached out. And here's why. It's so often we're doing what we're doing and we have no idea what the impact of that is. And you may sometimes feel that for you and your team. And it's like, hey, what is the impact of that? Which episodes were most, impactful or not? Yes, I can see the numbers. But hearing that from you created additional motivation for me to say, hey, we're going to create the best podcast because I know it's making an impact in the world of work for folks. So I'm so grateful that you've reached out, and I'm so grateful to hear those things for you that resonated and how you've been able to move them forward to have an impact on your team and on Potawatomi as a whole.
Yeah, well, I appreciate those kind words, and I appreciate everything you do to generate this podcast because, a lot of times you present things that I didn't even think about or I thought about and forgot. I'm like, well, I should really focus on that because there is the benefit of your podcast and the ideas that do come from it. And if I could just say one thing to the audience out there is that these ideas do work, but they do take time. Don't get discouraged if you try to do something and within a week it doesn't stick or take hold. You need to nurture it and take care of it, and you won't get a radical change right away. It's those small inch by inch changes that lead to the big picture change. So just stick with it and keep listening to Traci's podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam.
I appreciate you taking the time to have me on your show.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, what we are going to do this week that's a little bit different is I'm going to share some insights and really take in what Adam had talked about in our show next week. So you're not going to get the 3 insights after the show, but you'll get a full 20 minutes next week. So thank you so much for being with us and have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for listening today. I'd love to connect with you. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn at Traci, Traci Austin, and at our website at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. If you'd love to learn more about our process, please reach out to us. And again, thank you so much for listening and sharing your feedback with us through a review. Have a fantastic day.